Hey everybody, Scott Detweiler here. I'm back with another, what do we call it, Capture One Photoshop live stream. So just kind of going to work on some projects here and discuss what I shot, some techniques, and obviously answer any questions that you might have. These are some images that I shot on Sunday, and part of this was to shoot that helmet that has oftentimes been sitting behind me. My camera is actually busy at the moment, so I don't have it on. I usually use my Sony A7R III as my webcam as well as my work cam, and it is currently busy, so I don't have video today. But that's okay. It saves you from having to look at this face that I have. So, but I shot the helmet, and I am not going to show you the image that we're going to do for print competition, but I'll show you what I did end up creating. So I made these two bands for her as well as a belt. So we can kind of get everything covered and family friendly, but yet make it really interesting. So we're not going to retouch those pictures today, though. Those are going to be for a separate thing. That's a completely bigger project. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to show you some making of the helmet. And I don't really have a lot of video there, but I do have some stills and I can walk through the process. And I do have a little bit of video of me making the belts. And then we shot some behind the scenes video of me actually doing the photography part of that special scene that we're going to be creating. I'm going to show you the sketches I have, and then we're going to bring it all together with some different photos that we're going to use a technique called photo bashing, which is combining different images into one image, as well as some 3D work. That because I have some scene images that I want to create that don't exist, and I want them to look photographically real. So we're going to actually make those in 3D. Now, I'm not a god by any means when it comes to Blender, which is the tool I use for 3D. I've been a 3D artist on and off for probably 20 years. So I'm a little old fashioned in the way I do things, and I have to learn some new tricks, but I thought that might be kind of cool for people that were interested in that part of it. And if you're not, well, then just skip that part of the video when we get to releasing that thing. And it's going to be a couple weeks because the International Print Competition entries deadline, I think, is October 6th. So I have to have them all done at that time. So before that time, I'll have that video done and then we'll release it after the judging is done, because obviously if the judges see it, it gets disqualified. So we're going to work on today is we're going to work on some of these. We have this thing in the studio. I just call it my water box, and it's just a squares of wood with black plastic strung between them. And what we do is we use this for filling it with paint and other things, and then playing in it. And you can do all kinds of cool art in this little shallow pool. So it is, we put her in here, and I put some paint in the water, which is why you see it's kind of pearlescent and yet brown to kind of work with the colors of the outfit. And I just had her pose. So we did a bunch of random stuff here. I'm just making sure we don't have any wardrobe malfunctions, as I know we did during the event. But, well, that's, yeah, we're getting close there. Anyway, so I want to do is I want to find one of these that I really like, and then we're going to retouch it today. So I haven't really looked at these yet. I culled them for focus, and that was about it. By the way, in Capture One, you can cull for focus by using this here. So if you click on focus mask, it will draw a green mask and let you see everything that is in focus. So you're able to go through your shoot quickly to determine if you have what you need, and if not, if you have a few, and I've deleted them already, but if you have some that you just missed the face completely, then you can be a sad panda about that. But at least you'll know if you got it in focus or not. Like here, it's not as tight as it probably could be focus-wise, but some of these other ones are, spot on. So, by the way, that's Control Space Bar to bring up the loop anytime you would like to check your focus. Anyway, you turn that off. It's annoying. By the way, you can adjust that significantly if you go up into Edit Preferences. I believe it's under Image. No, we're going to find it here. Where is it? Focus. There we go. Of course. You can change the color of that mask. It's how sensitive it is, which, by the way, is huge in determining how handy the tool is. So you have to determine what you think is appropriate for your threshold as far as where your tolerance for focus goes. I used to say focus is subjective because sometimes a blurry picture is actually okay, but a lot of times a blurry picture is not okay. So there's times when blurry is acceptable, and this is not one of them. So you can adjust what you think is your acceptable tolerance for this, and then you can decide how opaque you would like that whatever color it is to be on there, and then change the color, of course. So very handy and quick for focusing through or panning through a bunch of images to determine what you want to work on. Now let's get rid of this bar. It's taking up valuable real estate. Okay. All right, so I want to pick one of these to work on today, and I think. I mean, she's just so amazing. Like every time I work with her, I get great pictures. So I think I like this one. So we're going to work on this one, and I'm going to show you some techniques for messing with the water a bit, augmenting that. I don't know if you see down here, where was it? Some of these were the water. We didn't get a chance to really kind of stir it in as much as we'd like. This stuff tends to settle to the bottom, or parts of it tend to settle to the bottom. So as she moved, it would get whirled around. There's a lot of these in here that are really nice. I mean, it's hard to take a bad picture of her, although I think I got her mid-blink there, maybe? I don't know. But I like the hand position here quite a bit. However, I do like the hair in some of these, so we might borrow bits and pieces from other images. And that's one of the reasons why you'll notice that if I talk about purging my images, so over time, one of the reasons I use a session instead of a catalog is my capture folder here contains obviously all the images I shot for the day. And then my selects folder is my favorites, the keepers. And when all said and done in like a year or so, I'm actually going to delete this capture folder. I'm just going to delete the thing. And the reason I do that is because everything that I wanted should have been moved to the select folder already. So if I'm happy with those pictures, why do I need to keep the seconds? Well, I might want to borrow some of that weird water or, hair or something like that. So I may want to use it. So I don't delete my capture folder right away. I wait a while, but eventually this will die. And then what will be left is the select folder. Now the selects folder is going to suffer the same fate because ultimately every image I love from here will then have an equivalent in the output folder. So in the output folder, like I did this one already, that one already exists in this selects folder, although I have it turned off because I'm just using different colors here. Some of those are not exactly YouTube friendly, so because there's some chest involved. We did a part of a maternity suit there, a maternity shoot, and she had some somewhat transparent clothing for some of that, and I can't show that on YouTube. Although I might retouch one of those and put it in the members area. I won't put that on the general YouTube here where advertising is part of the process. Anyway, so eventually the select folder will also die because everything that will end in selects will have a retouched version in the output location. And I don't need to worry about keeping my raws anymore. And obviously you may disagree with that, and that's fine. You go ahead and you back up your raws and whatever. And if you're a person who doesn't take everything to Photoshop, obviously that makes the most sense. But every one of my images will probably end up going to Photoshop at some point. So let's do this one. So let's retouch this. Let's make sure we have focus first of all, and we do. So I like that. Do I like her eyes in that? I do. Yep. Okay. So let's fix this one up. So we're going to start our standard process here. If you're familiar with this stream and this channel, you'll notice that I have a very standard workflow for things, and that's what I walk you through each time we do one of these images. And it's just a good practice for you to have a workflow that is common. You do the same thing every time. It may vary depending on image to image, but really your workflow is going to be about the same. So I always start at the lens correction here and make sure that I'm pulling extra shadow here. That's the curve that I prefer. You pick whatever curve you would like, and you see they vary wildly. The linear response, by the way, is the curve, and I call it the curve-free version of what came out of your camera. So this is a very handy one if you're looking to start from scratch and kind of bring it up yourself. But the extra shadow curve inside of my Sony is one I really like. And so I find it to be a little bit better than auto, just slightly. And the only reason is because I'm eventually going to darken or lighten this image as the end result. But when we go into Photoshop, I want as much data as possible when we actually hit Photoshop. So shadow detail is important. I can always darken it later, but lightening it creates issues. And remember, you're in RAW right now, and RAW has all the power. So we want to do all of our adjustments in here for exposure we can do. We want as much shadow detail as we can get, and we want to make sure that our highlights are where we want them, because we can always darken things later, but brightening them is just not going to work. And once we leave RAW and enter Photoshop, things become a lot harder to manipulate in that way. So I have my sharpening turned off, by the way. I don't prefer sharpening before I begin my retouching process, just a personal preference. Some people do a pre-sharpen. I do not. And I don't think I have much of a vignette to worry about here. My camera's pretty decent. My lens is nice. I may push that a little bit. We will eventually do something, but I don't care for forcing a vignette like this. I paid a lot for my lens so that it doesn't vignette, so I don't want to use this. That's, again, just personal preference. And then I'm not a white balance guy either, because we're going to play with the color of this thing a ton. So I'm not really worried about white balance. I just shot it on auto because we're going to manipulate it later. The end result, though, is that her skin needs to look good. Her skin tone needs to look healthy. And I really don't care what white balance that equates to. Again, this is art, so it is subjective. And if this was a client shoot, that would be a different thing, but it's not. So we're going to go to our exposure, and this is where the heavy lifting is done. So you see we have a very good curve. So what I mean by a good curve is that, again, we cover all the way from our black to our whites, and we didn't clip anything. We didn't destroy any whites here. And you may think, wow, that is really bright. That's okay. We can always darken it, right? But we can't brighten it because if you've watched the stream before, you know that half of your image data is here in this quarter of this histogram. That's half of your data. So if this image is say one stop underexposed like this, because you're like, well, I like it a little more saturated and a little more dark and moody, you actually have half the data to work with now. That means that you're going to have a little bit noisier image, and you're going to have more problems because this dark part here is also falling near the edge. It's going to fall off. In fact, I mean, we use this exposure slider, but you see it's right here. If I hit underexpose this one stop, this would probably be all the way off the grid here, which means all the detail in her hair would now be black and noisy if we try and increase it later. So be aware that your exposure here is critical. Looking at your histogram in the back of your camera is really the difference between being able to create really great art and arguing with your camera. So always push it this way, and note you can darken it later as long as you don't push it too far. If you touch this edge, those things become difficult to recover at times, but you want to get it as close as you can, and don't trust the preview in the back of your camera because it's kind of a lie. You know, it's going to look really bright in the back of your camera and lead you to a conclusion that's incorrect. All right, so this is the time for me to correct these things here, because once we go to Photoshop, really the big one we can't change anymore would be exposure. This one starts to makes the image muddy later on. It just doesn't do the same thing. Now it does some really cool things, but later on it's not so cool. But we don't need exposure. This looks good here. By the way, if you hold down your Alt key, you can adjust this in smaller increments than the big ones that you can normally. And then contrast, I again do not adjust contrast at this point. We can always do this later, and adjusting it now just makes difference between the two things. And then I have a brightness here, and brightness is really going to be our baby when we get done with Photoshop. When we come back here, instead of exposure, we're going to use brightness. Gets me and see if I play Roblox. I do not. And then saturation, we will not play with that either. Again, we can always play with that later, but not right now. We're going to do that later. And then highlight, shadow, white, and black. These are the ones where right now we can do some playing. So if we need to control the brightness of her skin a bit, and I would hover over her skin and say, I want that line to be kind of right on that stop. That's just the general guide for Caucasian skin should be one stop over 18% gray, which is the middle one. And we see she's doing okay. She's a little darker here. She's bright here, and she's darker here. So let's kind of fix that. So I'm going to hit G for gradient, and I'm just going to draw a gradient out. And if I hit M, you can see how this works, where this is the part that's affected the most, and then it starts to degrade from this point all the way through where this is nothing. So once this is set, hit M for mask again, I can go ahead and raise the exposure, and it'll mostly expose over here and not anything over here. So I'm just trying to even this exposure a bit. Something like that. Again, we can always do our nuances later, but I want a good place to start, just a good rule of thumb. Okay, do I care about exposure over here? Maybe. Now, I didn't have to create a new layer when I created this first adjustment because it did it for me, because it won't let you create a gradient on the background layer. So it popped that in there. But if I want to do this again, I'm going to have to create a new layer. So I'm going to hit G for gradient. I'm going to draw my gradient out this way. And then I can raise the exposure just a bit over here. So I'm creating something that is equal. Now, I haven't decided what my crop's going to be, and I typically don't want her knees to be in this, so we're probably going to end up cropping it right here. David asked if I would use a radial gradient mask. I do use it, but in this case, I think that because we don't really have a strong vignette, that the straight gradient here, the linear gradient, will work here. So that looks good to me. All right, so I've got my exposure done, my shadow. Now I'm going back to the background now, because if we stay on this, then we're adjusting the shadow just for that one layer. And we don't, I want to get the whole thing now, because the whole background should be about the same, because we fixed our problems here with the left and right sides. And now we go back to the background. Terry's asking, where would black skin fall? I don't know that there's a guideline for it, but I know that when I'm retouching it, it just tends to have this look when you're like, okay, that looks really good. And I don't really, this is subjective. In fact, I think this might even be a bit bright in most people's minds. But yeah, I guess other races and skin tones that I'm aware of I don't know all of the rules that they might have in the zone system, which is what that came from. He shoots, Terry says he shoots Sony and the skin seems to be orange. Yeah, but you can change that. You can also change your curve, or your ICC profile. So if you go over here, it's shooting the generic. You can say show all, and you can go and find a camera that you like the skin tone better. I mean, that's all good. Like if you're a Canon person and you really like orange skin, then you can go in here and you can really, really pop that orange. So yes, that was a joke. Anyway. Yeah, so you can go in and change those curves to one that the skin might be better. Even if you shoot a Sony, you can make it act like a phase 1 if you'd like. If you say, hey, I really wish I had a phase 1 IQ 250, hanging around the house. There you go. You can go in and do whatever type of curve you would like to apply to that. I like my Sony, so I'm happy here. Okay, so let's go back to there. Sorry, a little distraction, but it was a good question. So now we're going to adjust the background. Now we can adjust our shadow across the entire image, which I don't want to do. That looked bad. The white, again, a white point. We don't really have anything white here that would get messed up other than her chest. And again, I don't think that needs more brightness at this point. And the black point is, if we need to raise any detail that's stuck in the blacks. So I think it's fine where it is now. We're gonna push this quite a bit. So I'm not worried about having it look artistically perfect before we go into Photoshop. I think that's a big difference between my workflow and a lot of other people's workflow. Is you're trying to finish it in Capture One, and I am not. I am trying to get it to a good baseline to go into Photoshop. And we come out of Photoshop later, then we're going to push it to where we want it. But I'm looking for a solid baseline. So I think my workflow is a little bit weird in that respect. However, I did take some headshots the last couple days, and we're going to start a new series where I'm going to give you the raws, and we're going to retouch them together. So we're going to do a portrait retouch, and we're going to do it all in Capture One, probably for a couple of them. For those of you who do not have Photoshop or don't know Photoshop, by the way, if you don't know Photoshop, I have a Couch to Photoshop series here on YouTube, and it's solid. I mean, I haven't really added episodes in months because I really don't know of anything else to add to it. As a photographer using Photoshop, there's really only 10 or 12 tools you need to know how to use and their techniques. Photoshop itself has hundreds of tools you will never touch. Video tools, 3D tools, some effects that are absolutely horrible, things like that you don't need to deal with, and I think they get lost in the whole mix. So we're going to be doing some of those retouched together projects here pretty soon, and I'm going to try and keep them all in Capture One for at least a couple of them. And then Photoshop, I'm actually going to kind of separate Capture One and Photoshop for some of these too, because some people watch this channel for Photoshop and not for Capture One. And I want to kind of, feed that too, because I don't want everyone to have to wade through Capture One if they don't need Capture One. But this, these streams are both because it's what I'm doing. All right, so I like this. I think this is a good baseline to go with, and I'm not sure if I want that highlight now. I might add this back later. So I use this kind of a method for quick dodge and burn at the end to kind of punch it if we need it. In fact, I think I'm going to take my exposure down just a little bit. I tend to brighten my skin as I retouch it, and that will lead to some hilarity later if we try and create more contrast in the image. Okay, this looks good. So I'm going to go to my process recipes here, and I have a process recipe for exporting things to, so make sure all these other ones are clear, to Photoshop, and all it does is use the name, and this is not Lunaria in a helmet, so I'm going to get down here to this part and say this is Lunaria in corset. So I like a nice verbose name. Let's say Lunaria. Let's do this way. Lunaria corset water. And what that's going to do is it's going to add that to this file name. I just prefer that. I like a nice verbose file name. You do what you do. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and process that and let Photoshop open up. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the stream. And if you are watching the stream and you like what you see, please click the like button. It's not uncommon for the stream to end and there to be no likes, but yeah, I had 40 or 50 people in here. So I really appreciate that, guys, if you do that. I have a couple haters in the channel now who go through and down vote every video. I guess that's just a YouTube thing. So those likes are much appreciated. Okay, one thing I do want to do here, though, is before we move to that, I'm going to take these settings for what we just did here, and I want to copy them up to the clipboard. So I'm just going to click up, and I did a video on the adjustment clipboard the other day, but this copies them up. And if we look at our adjustment clipboard here, we can see that all the things that we affected are touched, including the 2 layers we added. So now if I go to say this layer here and I copy it down, all those adjustments will be made. And I may want this for the water. So that's the reason I'm bringing this up, is I may want these 4 different parts of the water. And I want to make sure that the exposure is similar when I bring them in. But I may or may not do that, but I wanted to let you know why I may end up going back to the well there for that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my background layer. Now, I talked about a minute ago that I get rid of a lot of my raws later on, and one of the reasons I can do that is because my background layer here is that raw file that is perfectly, what do you want to call it, perfectly retouched. So there's no reason for me to keep that thing hanging around in my mind. I'm trying to resize this thing, and the navigator's arguing with me. What are you doing, Photoshop? My gosh. Well, Photoshop just decided to do something fun for me. That's good. It's Navigator now. You're not getting along. You know what, Navigator? You can go away. I don't know. I swear this new version of Photoshop crashes more often than any other version I've ever seen, and I have more trouble with the interface than any other time. So I don't even know what to tell you about that. Anyway, I won't change the size of that because it's not letting me. Okay, so let's hit Control Save just to make sure we get this thing. And I want to do is use the patch tool first and foremost to get rid of anything that's a little weird here. So I'm going to make sure I'm on this layer, and I don't like the way this is laying out here. It looks a little different than everything else. So I'm just going to grab that area, and against the edge, you have to be careful. So we should be able to mix that in there, and nobody should really be able to notice what we're doing. There's no pattern, so this is all easy. Just making it look how I want it to look. And then over here, if you don't like the glare, which I don't, I'm just going to highlight the whole thing and grab something else. Maybe grab this one. And that should get rid of that. This is a little light in here compared to its friends. I'm just going to grab a little bit darker area there. I want to make sure that I don't have any super repeaty patterns, just because that annoys me. And if I'm going to compete with this image someday, then I have to be very wary of issues like that. So just make sure you go back and kind of eliminate those by picking some areas that haven't been selected before, perhaps. Okay, that's pretty good. I imagine we're going to crop her knees off here, so I'm not really about that. Just get rid of any of these other little things that bother me. I don't mind this reflection here at all. I think it's kind of adds to the fact that she's in water. Okay, and so now let's do a quick skin retouch. So that's super fast. All we do, by the way, I'm gonna, well, I can do that. Just frequency separate this. Again, if you don't have my frequency separation action, you can grab it in the description below. I think I put it for free. It might be $1 now, and then it's free for members. I forget how I did it, but I want to do a lot more with the membership on the channel. So I'm trying to do more perks there. This looks pretty good. I'm looking to see if I have texture and color separated well. And if I think I do, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and then zoom in and see if I turn off my this brush layer's gold. Turn this off. I should see only that only the color in her lips. I shouldn't see color anywhere else. Then I know I've got it right. That looks good. Okay, so, and her makeup started to run too. Oh, this is gonna be a fun one. All right, so I'll turn this off. I'm gonna go to just the low layer. I'm gonna use my healing brush, and this is actually not gonna take very long. I know a lot of people are freaked out by skin retouching, and it's really not that hard. All we're doing is looking at this layer and removing anything that jumps out to us, right? So her makeup ran right there because it wasn't waterproof. So we're just going to fix it by going through here and removing anything that kind of jumps out to us. So this bright spot there, probably reflection from the ceiling, or the strobes, I should say. I was using two Godox Molites with, this one had I want to say a medium, these are 16-bit layers, by the way, David. Medium softbox, and then over on the side on the far end of the tub was a 7-inch reflector, so a small gridded reflector with a 30-degree grid, I believe, just to kind of give the legs a little bit of shine and not disturb everything. And then this paint here goes away. Super fast, easy, and a great result, which is rare for most things. Can't just go, let's pick Ludwig and call it good enough. No, we're producing art here, right? So that looks pretty good. Check out the skin here, mark. And this is brown paint from her playing with the paint. There are other shots of her playing with the paint. I think, I don't know if we're gonna leave that or not. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. It shows the paint coming from the water. These runs here. Drips, almost done with the skin completely already. Again, just sample, click, sample, click, sample, click. Same thing over and over again. Very fast, super fast way to work and get a good result. Not the best result. If you can do this the right way, you'd use dodge and burn to do the entire thing, but that would take hours, and you've got to have, I think, a pretty good reason to do that, like a client or something. So that looks good. So that's that. So now let's go and do the high layer. Same thing, I'll use a hard-edged brush at this point, and we just go and remove whatever we removed from the other layer. So just quickly go through here and remove anything that bothers us. Making sure, again, to sample in a lot of places. If you have areas that concern you, it's either on one of the two layers. And remember that that's not magically somewhere else. We don't have to find it or figure out where it is. It's on one of those two layers. That's why I like to do frequency separation early on, because then we can continue to make art and not have to worry about what layer something's on. We have two layers right now. These two layers down here, well, this layer is junk. But this background layer here is our raw. I will always keep that because, again, if I destroy my raw file someday, ooh, I'm drawing on it now, then I want to make sure that I can go back to it at some point if I, for some reason, wanted to. It makes life a lot easier. You're not keeping 8,000 files. I don't know about you, but I run out of file space, or I used to run out of file space quite often. And I look back and I'm like, I kept everything. I kept pictures that were completely bad, blinks, and just because it didn't cull very well, it didn't take the time to do it. And now I look back and I regret that. Now I got to go back and cull images from 2008, which is a complete waste of my time, because I'm trying to save drive space. And then of course that's a dumb excuse. So you know what I do? I don't do it. And yeah, I'm sad about it. That's fine. So, all right, that's good enough for the face, neck. I don't know what that is. I'm just gonna leave. I think it's just water reflection there. This is all good. There. If you want to soften it, by the way, you can just soften it on this layer. And I guess I don't like the way that looks. I don't even know what this is from. I think she was in a motorcycle accident and she skinned her body up pretty well. Her husband put his back to the pavement though and saved her from all the damage. So yeah, pretty cool guy. So needless to say, they don't do that much anymore. So just looking here. Did I polarize water? I did not. I could have, but the way to do this is just your angle of incidence and reflection, right? So if we have the softbox is right here, and you can tell that because of the nose shadow, so it's above her here, and it's pretty much the angle is coming in this way. So if my camera is over here and I shoot toward her face, yeah, the reflection's gonna be right here. But what I did is I put the camera up by the light and shot almost parallel to it, so the only reflection is here. I could have used a polarizer, sure, but this was actually a group shoot. I had 5 other people in the studio with me at the same time, and many of them are beginners, and they come to learn lighting and all this kind of stuff and to get some creativity into their portfolio, and they are not going to have polarizers. So I thought it fair just to play the same game they were and not do that. Okay, this looks good. So I'm done. I'm actually going to, I would say I usually flatten this right here and then get rid of these frequency separation layers and get rid of that one. So now we're back down to before and after, basically where we have come so far. And if there's anything that sticks out to me, I need to fix it. But I think that's plenty good enough. Again, you've seen the before and after. No one else will. So if you're like, well, that's a pretty, that's a pretty sharp edge down here. Well, that's fine. You see it, but no one else is ever going to see that. It's just so lost in things. Well, perhaps. That's not the greatest job in the world. Let's fix that. So just borrow from areas that have similar grain, perhaps. Right. Anything else? I didn't zoom in real close on this one. I probably should have. The other area I don't like is this dark, whatever this shadow is up here. So let's fix this. I'm just going to grab this and pull it over here. Grab that. This needs a little more love. There we go. Good enough. And we could obviously take this and run with it. We could make a much bigger pond. We can go, as big as we'd like to go to create whatever story we want to create. I wish I had, I don't know if I have any where I got all her legs in, but I don't like her leg position here, so that's why we're going to crop it here. Okay, what can we do with the water? I was thinking we'd put a texture on top of the water just to see what we can get. Let's see how that works. So I'm just going to bring up bridge here real quick. And I'm going to use one of my Painterly. By the way, if you did not see, I put all these on sale, and I did it for Labor Day with the code of Labor Day, and I did not delete the code yet. So if you wanted to sneak over there and grab any of these, I think it's 20% off all my texture packs. So I'll leave that for a bit. Once this stream is done, by the end of the day, I'll delete it, I'm sure. But if you want to grab those, obviously appreciate that. As a member, by the way, you get a free texture every month. I just give you one, so you can do that too. All right, let's use IO. This is actually the free texture this month for the members, and I love this texture. It's one of my favorites. Just gonna pop it in here like this. And now, before I do anything with it, though, I need to find her. So let's do select subject, and it's gonna have some difficulties, but it's be close enough. Yeah. So we're gonna go and refine that. This tool here, and I'm just gonna go and grab parts that I know are her. Super fast. Mega accurate, right? There we go. That's terrible. And if you hold on shift when you do select and mask, you can do the legacy version, which is one I prefer. And it's going to have a heyday with this. So I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this edge, and it's going to be like all weird, and that's okay because we're kind of looking for it to terminate into her body in an odd way anyway. So let's just see what happens here. That's not going to be good. This area might be hard. Something like that. Okay. Load. And then I'm going to select save selection and call it 1. And that actually just puts it over here under channels, which is really handy because you can just get to it by control clicking on that thumbnail. Okay, I'm gonna hit save here before I continue since Photoshop's been dying constantly. And I still have my texture loaded here, and I have my marquee going. I'm gonna hold this down and hold down Alt and click on the mask, which will apply the mask inverted. And that actually is kind of cool, but it's not the end result. What I need to do here is change the blending mode to overlay. Let's see how that looks. Who is messaging me? Okay, so got that. So we overlay or soft light, one of these two. So soft light and overlay. So it looks like soft light lets more of, ooh, well, hard light's a happy accident, isn't it? Well, that's pretty cool. I like this orange thing here, whatever that is. It's a visual distraction, sure, but what's the? How about this termination between her and the water though? Is that be a problem? Maybe. You see, it's this little this edge is sharper now. If we were doing something with, say, soft light, for example, there's no issues at all. This is going to be fine. In fact, why don't we do one like that, and then let's do another one with, actually that one looks okay too. If we went hard light on that one, perhaps. And all right, so what I want to do is I want this mask, but I want another mask. But I want a mask layer, and I want to do it in the easy way. I don't want to go vector mask, which is work. I'm just going to shift and click on this folder to make a group with this in it, and now I can make another mask on the group. I'm going to make a black mask, so that will take the entire thing away. I hit B for brush, paint with a white brush, and I can bring in parts of that I want to, but it won't, again, it still respects the mask, so the mask on the texture is still in place. I'm just looking to bring in some of this, perhaps. Do I like that? Maybe. I think it's getting to be too much. Yeah, let's just double up what we have. Maybe that's good enough. If we're going to double it, might as well just put it to overlay, because that's more or less the same thing. I don't know, I kind of like that pearlescent part of that. This is the process of discovery, right? Reduce the fill a little. Yeah, you could play with the opacity and the fill in these, but I tend to be, if I can get it here, I can nuance it. And yes, you absolutely could. I'm a person who actually I don't tend to play with opacity much at all. I rarely reach for opacity or fill. Rarely. And in fact, the only time I do these is when I have certain blending modes actually have a different result depending on if you're using fill or opacity. So there are times when I do play with those, but in this case, I kind of like all this pearlescence in the water. So I think what this added is nice. However, what if we flipped it over? So if we flip it 180 degrees, do we want to light it from the other way? I know I have to flip the mask yet. I'm just playing with the idea of, if I flip that, do I like it better? No, I like the light on the far side. Up front here, it looks a little like someone used a flash on their camera and you're getting it in the water. This over here is more interesting to me. And one other thing we can do here is we can play with exploring, manipulating the hue. So bring that in, clip it to just this texture, and then I take it all the way over. So push it all the way to the edge and see if there's something we want to find in here. I'm just going to work my way across. I kind of like the tan, though. It's very steampunky, and it's one of the reasons that we picked the color we picked for the water. But there's some other opportunities in here for sure. The blues are interesting, but I think I'm really loving this red kind of tone in here. Okay, so let's do a dodge and burn pass on her quickly. So I'm gonna do this the easy way. I'm just gonna create a new blank layer, shift backspace, and fill it with gray, and change this to overlay. It's very quick, and you can make an action to do that if you want to. And I'm gonna do this in her eyes. I'm gonna hit D, so I make sure I'm using default colors, and X so the white's on top. B for brush, and make sure that I'm on that layer. And that brush is huge, apparently. And we want to give this a little bit more catch light. So that is way too much fill. It's supposed to go at 1%, so I can build it up over time instead of sloshing it down all at once, which is probably fine. a little bit here in the eyes. Catch light again. If I want more catch light here, let's draw it in. Or we can borrow it. We can borrow it from this eye over here. You can go, you know, I really like you. You're right here. Make sure we're on the right layer. Control J, V to move it. And move it over. And then we can use the eraser or the mask, depending on what your preference is here. I'm going to use an eraser and just erase the edges so they're not crispy. Catch line. And then that's pretty decent. Like that. So now I'll use this layer here and just add a little bit more contour. So be large, soft brush, and do forehead here a little bit. Down the nose. She's such an amazing model to work with. Just every time I work with her, I get way too many good pictures. You're just making me work. Darken the cheeks a little bit here. Here. White and then dark. I'm toggling between black and white. That's all I'm doing. Just very quickly. Yeah, it's a great problem to have. Yeah, we make such good images every time. Every time. Thank you, David, for hitting the like button. I haven't checked it how many we got. We got 4 likes. We got 9 people watching. We got 4 likes. It's brutal. Brutal. All right, Control S. All right, so let's go back to Capture One and put the icing on the cake here. So I got to go into my output folder and find it. And it's right here. And we'll wait for Capture One to Photoshop to bring that back. So still saving. I have a slow drive for my working drive. My cache is a really fast one. My working drive is slower. I'm going to fix that. I need to rebuild my PC. I'm waiting for the new NVIDIA cards to come out. Then I'm going to start from scratch. New motherboard, new everything. It's about time. All right. Okay, there we go. We'll come back into Capture One. It will update eventually, or we can right click and force it, regenerate preview, and there we go. Okay, so let's fix a crop first of all, because that's been bugging me the whole time. So crop, got to crop out her knees here, and do I want some more rotation to this? Because why not? Rotation's interesting, right? Because I don't need all that extra headroom over her. I mean, she's the pretty part here, right? The texture in the water is cool, but I could have taken a picture of an empty pool, so just make sure I get as much of the water as I'd like. And I don't want to crop below the knee in general. It's just kind of bad form, but I also don't mind her knee going into the corner. There's kind of a leading line of sorts. Something like this. Like I like that rotation. It's decent. We could actually rotate it a little bit and see what happens. Do I like it upside down like that? I don't know. I got used to looking at it like this now, and I don't want to change it. But we could, oftentimes flipping an image like that yields some happy accidents. So I'm not against doing that, even when it's something as simple as someone hanging from like a lyra hoop or a silk. Rotation can sometimes lead to some really cool results. Okay, so let's do the same thing. So let's go back to our exposure, but now we don't play with the slider anymore, because if we play with it, notice everything looks kind of muddy. And if we look, our curve suffers significantly here. Right? We don't have anything here. And if you haven't taken a painting class in your life, I highly suggest you do, because you always want to have a white point. There's always something that's close to white in the image. In this case, maybe on her knees isn't so great. Like I'll probably, I don't know, maybe I should go in and remove that in frequency separation. But for this level of image is not a competition level image. I'll probably just leave that there. But normally, yes, I would say go in and remove these highlights. Or we just crop them out. We can do that too. Like, are her knees that important to this image? Like, if we crop it like this, do we care? Maybe I even like that better. You know what? I like that better. Maybe a little bit far. I always let my instinct guide me. Is it too far, and then use that knee-jerk reaction to judge. Don't second guess yourself. If it doesn't feel right, fix it, because you're probably right. So something like this. And so we don't use exposure now because it makes things muddy, and we don't want to move that white point. So the brightness slider does that. It leaves the white point and plays with the middle. So if you wanted to make it more moody, you're pulling everything else back, but leaving the white point in place. And you can even make that more aggressive by pulling the actual white point of the curve in if you want to. But you gotta be careful not to touch your data, or you'll start to clip. You can tell that by turning clip warning on. And then as you clip, you can see where you're encountering issues. So you could brighten it that way just a bit if you wanted to, but I'm not gonna. Because the other way we can do it is push the highlights up. So if we push the highlights up, and you put it to the extreme here, you can see what's happening. It's clipping everywhere. But if we push it a little bit, we can get that little bit more here that we were doing by pulling the curve in. Same thing, but it's only in her face and other areas. So it's adding a little bit of almost painterly feel to the image. So I like this use of the background slider, or brightness slider, I should say, to darken it. And then any shadow control here, anything shadow wise, well, maybe a little bit. White point, nope, don't need that. Black point, maybe. All right. Okay, so let's do one other thing. Let's add a new layer, or hit B. We don't need to add the new layer, by the way. We can hit B for brush and start drawing, and it's going to go ahead and add the layer for us because it is the only layer. So I'm just going to highlight these flowers here a little bit. She makes all these her own outfits. She's just so amazing to work with. She just brings the whole creative A game every time. M for mask. So I'm going to see what I'm doing here. And we'll do the same effect on the corset. Careful not to touch your skin. This flower, and this flower. Hit M for mask, and then we're going to go and grab our clarity tool and probably put it to punch because that's the one I like here. Probably punch it up just a bit. Just a little bit more zing. Zing! That's what we're adding there. Magical zing. Okay, that's good. I actually do the eyes as well usually, so I'll create a new layer and we'll just call it eyes. For once, I'll actually label a layer. B for brush, and just kind of take and go hit M for mask. As I'm doing, just kind of do this. And I actually have a preset for clarity called eyes. And all it does is set the clarity classic, makes it a 17 with the structure of 24. That's all it does. And all that does is add that little bit of, you know, before and after and just the eyes. Before, after. It's just so slight. But it's the nuances that make the retouching, right? It's the double in the details thing. So now her eyes look really great, and it doesn't look overbaked, so we know we did it right. Okay, so now the question is, what can we get away with in this water? Like, that's kind of the fun question. So let's fill a whole new layer, fill the thing, and adjust clarity on it, and see what this water does. Let's turn it up to 11 here. That's terrible. How about punch? Don't worry about her. Look at the water. Punch. Neutral. Or classic. Classic's probably the winner. So what I want to do is I have the whole thing, you know, obviously the mask looks like this, right? We don't want that. We want to get rid of it being on her. So I'm going to hit E for eraser, and I'm just going to make this eraser tool huge. And I'm just going to go and erase it from it touching her. And I'm doing it with a very big brush. So this is what we did. And the reason we do that is because clarity on skin looks terrible. And Second of all, the big radius on this brush means that we don't really see where the stops, where the effect stops and where the effect starts. Nobody is going to notice that difference. We do, but they don't, and that's fine. I do want a little bit more, maybe a little bit more character in the water here. Like, was this enough of a something? I'm not sure. I kind of want to go back. I kind of want to go back here and duplicate this again, and then maybe get rid of a bunch of it. So yeah, put this in a group, mask the whole thing out, and then draw in just the corners. So I'm drawing like this, so I'm making just a little bit more flow here, maybe. Just a little bit more. So it's not a vignette per se. I mean, it is a vignette, but it's a vignette made of the image itself and not some sort of opaque black thing that's obscuring the pretty lady. Right, so that's what our vignette looks like. Something kind of organic-y. This organic-y. Save that. I just think it's more interesting. It needed something. It's kind of flat. If you have any questions on what I'm doing here, holler. Throw it in the chat there. And again, if you like the stream and you like what you see, take a moment, click the like button, and I'll keep doing these. I do these Tuesday mornings at 11 o'clock Central Time for a lot of my European viewers, and then I do one at 6 p.m. Central Time on Thursdays usually. And same kind of thing. It's going to be Photoshop and Capture One. Okay, so let's go fix this again. This thing saved, almost saved. Come on. Almost. This is the tedious part. Soon this will be fixed and we'll have a faster machine. You guys won't be bored waiting for me to do this. All right, we're almost done. We're going to color grade this thing. After we figure our water out, there we go. Right back here, refresh, preview, regenerate preview. There we go. More variation now. This is just more interesting to me. A lot more interesting. Okay, so let's color grade this. I'm going to go back to the background. I'm going to go and grab my color balance tool, start in the shadow, and I want to do, again, extreme movement. So all the way down and all the way around. And I want to find what makes me happy. And normally it's in the blues here. It's normally over in here. But today, I'll be darned if it doesn't look like it wants to live over here, doesn't it? Do I want a little blue in there? I don't know. I think this is more pleasant to me. A mid-tone, I don't tend to play with the mid-tone, but we'll look at it. It's going to be more where the skin lives, right? So maybe we can give her a little bit of a tan. And the master is the overall push, right? So this is also, you have to be careful because it can overexpose the image if you're not careful. This is very interesting color variance we have here based on what I normally do, right? Something like that. That's pretty interesting. I like the way that turns out. Normally, this is not how I would do this. In fact, I would probably use like one of these, one of my standard complements. And you see I named them very fancy. But one of these would be where I would normally land. But, oh, that one's really nice, isn't it? Kind of. Do I like that one or do I like that one better? This? Or this? No, I think I do like this better. All right, so what this one is again, some blue in the shadow. Just check it out. I thought I was going to be different, and not this time. No. How much blue? Not a lot of blue. Just a bit. Mid-tone, a little bit. I did that. And then master is pushed up here. What I do with the master is I put it all the way up, and I get to her skin. Like, this is too red. This is too yellow. So find the skin tone you like, and then pull it down until you're happy with it. I think that looks great. I'm really happy with that. And maybe this is too bright here. So let's add a new layer. G for gradient, pull down a layer, gradient, and then kind of pull the brightness back. Just a bit. I'll rotate this just a bit. I don't want it hitting her face so much as it was. Something like that. Yeah, that looks nice. I like this variation in the corner here too. I like how that turned out. All right, is there an overall saturation maybe to add to this image? Normally I don't play with this button, but maybe today. Something like that. I think that looks really sweet. Okay, so our before and after for colorizing inside of Capture One, this is what we got color grading wise. So I'm pretty happy with that. Nice punch. Yeah, that turned out nice. Okay, so let's export this thing. So again, process recipes, send one to the copyright office, put one in my my printable folder so I can print it later, and then one to go to social media and all the other places on the internet where work is ignored unless you pay to have it boosted. Let's change this to white watermark because the black one's being lost. And put it somewhere unobtrusive. Like that. Ta-da! I like it. I'm happy with that. I think that turned out nice. So that was a good example of taking it from flat baseline. So which one is it? This one. For our flat baseline, so we flatten our image out. We get it ready for Photoshop. So we want to do all our heavy lifting in Photoshop. And what I meant by heavy lifting was skin retouching and equalizing our texture of our water and doing anything else like that. Then bringing it back to Capture One to do the final color grading. Yes, you could do it all in Photoshop, but then you can also do most of that in Capture One as well. But the combination of the two tools, I think, leads to a better result and it's quicker because speed is really critical when this is what you do for a living, right? So I'm very happy with this outcome here. Yeah, there you go. Maybe a little bit too red. I gotta play with that. I'm gonna leave this sit for a bit. I talk about that a lot. Don't export it right away because you may come back to it in an hour and go, oh man, that is just too red. Like her face looks a little bit red. Always give yourself a little bit of time to come back and say, did you make the right call on something? And walking away, letting your eyes get reset is important, very important part. Always give your eyes a chance to rest. So if you have any questions, throw them in the comments below. If you're new to the channel and you liked what you saw, click the like button and of course subscribe if you'd like. There's a lot more content coming and a lot bigger projects where start to finish from concept to lighting to the whole thing. So hey, thanks for watching everybody and appreciate it. And everybody stay safe and I will catch you next time. Take care.